What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Winning the Margins podcast with me, your host, Gabriel Rocha. Today, I am joined by Mr. Tommy Stiles here. If you guys know him, you guys know exactly what he's all about. Hard training, good coaching, and the things that he brings to this industry, I think, are missing from a lot of coaching and also the education side. So, really excited to be here with Tommy today. I've known Tommy now for a few years, and I actually got a chance to go to Phoenix last year for work. I believe it was in November. And I specifically went there to go to the Muscle Factory to learn how to train back from Tommy. So we actually got a session in together. I got some good cues, and I've still been using those cues to this day. So before I get into any of my questions, Tommy, where can the people find you at?
Thank you for that intro. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on. Simple Instagram, T Styles 2, and then my YouTube channel, Tommy Stiles, are the top two ways to find me. My coaching website, stylesstrength.com. Those are going to be the top three ways to get a hold of me. I think I'm on Facebook too, but I don't really do a ton over there. So Instagram and YouTube are my go-tos.
So go ahead and give Tommy a follow. I think you guys will get a lot of value from just following along and seeing how he talks about things. Some of the most insightful tips that I have gotten have just been from his training clips on Instagram and just reading through the caption and seeing what his approach looks like. So he's got years and years of experience, and today we're going to be getting into that. So I just want to jump right into the deep end, man. So I know I've been following you for a while. I love seeing that you blend a stoic philosophy approach into not only the way you carry yourself as a bodybuilder, but also into your coaching. So, being in that role of a coach and leading young men and older men as well, how does stoic philosophy allow you to lead better?
The main principle that I take away from Stoicism, uh, among many, is control what's in your control. And I feel like I'm always trying to come back to that. That's like my North Star. That's been my how I've approached life and bodybuilding over the last 10 years, and how I try to do it from a coaching perspective as well. So, when I have a client bring me a situation, I just break it down like what's in our control and what's not. The things that aren't in our control, we're just not going to give them attention. We're not going to water them in our brain. We're not going to ruminate. We're not going to give those things bandwidth. We only have so much bandwidth to go around. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. It's a very noisy time in the world in 2026 with social media. AI is, louder and louder by the day. There's just a lot of noise. And then everybody has their own personal noise, life situations, job situations, political noise is louder than ever. So trying to get people to just box themselves in. What do we have in our control? And it might even be down to like what's in my control the next 60 minutes. And I'm just going to focus on that. And then I'm going to restart and go for the next 60 and the next 60. And I mean, it's a lot of context dependent situations, but being able to be that voice of reason for people and how do we keep what's the best move on the chessboard? How do we keep the train moving forward and on the tracks? And the way I've seen it kind of work into my own life and my own bodybuilding is whenever something happens that isn't planned, let's take like an injury, for example, or in like my case, I had to fix my gut late last fall into this year. That was a 4-month process. That wasn't planned. There was a part of me that wanted to sulk and, to kind of have that victim moment for myself and, woe is me. Why do I have to do this?
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to get me anywhere. That's not going to get anybody anywhere. So the quickest way to get out of it is acknowledge it. This is how I feel. What can I do? Dom Cardone, my coach, laid out the protocol. And from there, it just, all right, what's in my control? These are the things that are in my control. This is all I'm going to focus on right now. And that's how I was able to kind of navigate it.
How long did it take you from learning about Stoic philosophy, reading about it, and starting to implement it, did it take until you were able to actually apply it to your own life and have those moments where, something unplanned ends up happening and you're able to truly control where your mind goes with it and not sit in the sulk of it?
So I first read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius in 2017. I was in a contest prep when I came across the mention of it. I want to say it was on a Conor McGregor YouTube video, and that's where I heard it kind of dropped. So I got curious about it, went to the bookstore, Barnes and Noble, and bought the book and started reading it during that prep. It's a very challenging read because it's not something I find you can just sit down and read, cover to cover. It's not a fiction novel. It's not a thriller. You're not on the edge of your seat. It can be very dry. So I read it very slowly and I just tried to absorb what I was reading. The application of it, obviously I saw some of it in that contest prep, but the biggest thing I saw from it probably came around 2 years later when the living situation I was in fell through. And without really spending any time panicking or thinking, I just went and lived at the gym I worked at and trained at. That night, I just took what I could to the gym, dragged a couch across the gym floor to a back room, and kind of sat there and made peace with I'm 28 years old living in the back of a gym now. And if I can't stay here, I don't know where, the next step is living under a bridge next to people who I may have previously looked at with an ego of how did you let yourself get to that point? So it brought me a lot of humility because it's I can kind of, maybe I can see how one thing led to another and you got to that point because I'm not far away. We might be neighbors soon.
Yeah.
That was where I first saw the application of it in real time. And I remember there's a quote, it's in the book, but it's quoted in Gladiator, which is my favorite movie of all time. There's a lot of Marcus Aurelius references and there's a lot of lessons in that movie as a whole. Nothing happens to anyone that he is not fitted by nature to bear. So basically what that means is whatever happens to you, you are capable of taking it on. You're not going to be presented with any challenge or any adversity that you aren't capable of getting through. How you get through it and how you react to these situations is totally in your control. So back to, what do I have control of? I have control over the things I put in my mouth. I have control over my training. I have control over my income because I still had a job. I have control over my mindset, rather than be woe is me, I'm living in a gym. I chose to look at it as I'm grateful that I have this gym to live in and that I'm not living under a bridge. So it's just about changing the perceptive eye of whatever situation you're in. And now, I've had little mini injuries over the years. You pop a fiber in a quad on a leg press, and I feel I'm able to take those on. That was exactly what was supposed to happen. And I almost feel like a kick returner in a football game, spinning off of a tackler and just continuing to go that's just all it is to me is boom, I just popped a fiber in my quad. I'm going to see my PT next week. He's going to fix it and this is not going to derail me. That's how quickly I've learned to just stay on the forward path and not let any situation take me off course, because the course now becomes whatever I have to work around or work through. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. That's another very popular quote. Ryan Holiday has talked about that. And it's just about accepting it. The less resistance you give to the adversity that you're presented with, the more seamless your path becomes.
Yeah, and that's actually something I just touched on in the reel that I posted earlier today on my Instagram page. It's titled "Don't Suffocate the Moment," and part of what I talk about in there is when you have too much of an expectation over an outcome, chances are you're going to be disappointed in the outcome because you, especially when you don't have control over it, right? We talked about, or you talked about already, like you have to focus on controlling what you have in your direct control, which is can you execute at a high level? You don't have control over where the judges are going to place you, which means that when you place an expectation on something you don't have control over, you relinquish your sense of self or worthiness or identity to something that someone else has actual control over. And that's not a place that you want to be in. And so within that video that I made about not suffocating the moment, I also talked about accepting the moment like you chose it. And I think that that is such an integral part of Stoicism, where you have to have that initial moment of accepting that this is what it is. And when you are not trying to suffocate the moment or constrain it into something that you wish it was instead, that's when you can actually take that next step forward to make that next best decision. And so you talk about going through injuries. There are many people, myself included, who've experienced injuries before, and the first thing you think about is how much is this going to derail me by? How much time is it going to take to heal? Do I need surgery? What does that path look like? It's going to take me off of the path. But the reframe that comes from Stoicism is, well, this just became the path. It's like Kobe when he tore his Achilles. He knew in that moment, he was like, I need to get up, I need to shoot these free throws, and then I'm going to go get checked out. And I don't know if I'm going to make it back to the court, but I need to do this right now in this moment. And then I'll deal with the rehab when I get there. And I think that there's so much that we can take away from Stoicism. And for those of you guys who aren't familiar with Stoicism or meditations from Marcus Aurelius, it is Marcus Aurelius's meditations in a journal that he wrote when he was the ruler of Rome. And those writings were never actually meant to see public. They were just his immediate meditations as he was going through and processing, what does it mean to be a good king? How can I rule a kingdom if I can't even rule myself? And so the entire process of going through meditations is learning how to rule his own mind so that way he can make the next best decision to be a good and just king. Now, when it comes to Stoicism and your philosophy, what have you found besides controlling the controllables that has had the greatest impact in your life?
That's the biggest one. And then, to put principles of it into rhetoric that I think the listeners can understand is don't worry about a problem until there's a problem. I think a lot of people tend to create anxiety around things that aren't their actual reality. They're a possible thing that may happen. Let's take bodybuilding, for example. Like, what if I do everything I'm supposed to in a contest prep and I lose? Then that's just what happens.
Yeah.
There's no sense in panicking or giving bandwidth to that thought because you don't have control over that outcome. You have control over your process, which is all I try to focus on for myself and then what I focus on with clients. We aren't going to worry about the muscle that we don't have when we are in a contest prep because we can't accrue it. We can't, order it on Amazon Prime. We can't achieve it in that time period. So biggest thing you can do and that I've encouraged clients to do is when you have these thoughts in a prep, because that's a common one, is, as people diet down, they start to see a lot of things that aren't there. And I've gone through it. Keep notes on your phone. And then you can revisit those notes when you're in the off season. Because you're going to be in a situation where you don't want to eat the food. You're having to push through meals. The wear and tear of training is taking its toll. The monotony and the mundane that is the extended off seasons is taking its toll. Revisiting those notes that you wrote in your contest mindset is almost going to be a way to fuel your future self when you're facing the adversity that the off season brings. That's one practice I encourage clients to make, and something I've done for myself. Like I've recorded videos of myself talking to my future self It's
Mhm.
like a video series that I keep on my phone. I don't share it online, but it's like Tommy 4 weeks out needs to talk to Tommy when he's 50 weeks post show,
Mhm.
because what Tommy's facing and how Tommy thinks 50 weeks post show is completely different than where Tommy is 4 weeks out, right? So it's like that's me sharpening my skill set and my mindset to lead myself better in that part of the battle or war. Not that I think bodybuilding is battle or war, but that's kind of how I approach it, is like the mission is all one big mission, but it
Mhm.
has sub missions built into it. Um, Post show is its own battle. Contest prep is its own battle. Off season is its own battle. Extended off seasons, when you're taking a year plus away from the stage. I spent 4 years not competing. I was still very much a competitive bodybuilder during that time frame. I just was navigating other chapters in my life. Um, like I said, you're going to have things like bodybuilding isn't a straight A to B process. If you want to see how good you're going to be and how much you can tap into your genetic potential, you're going to have to realize that you you're going to be navigating a lot of life, but you're going to have to take on the identity of being a bodybuilder while you navigate that life. So like when I didn't have a place to stay and went to live in the gym, I was still about, I didn't just say, well, I'm living in a gym, bodybuilding's off the table. I
Mhm.
stayed working with a coach. I was checking in from that gym. I was following a meal plan. My immediate mindset went to, how do I operate and follow the plan with my new set of given circumstances? But that sense of responsibility and boxes to check is what kept me on a path of moving forward, and not playing into that victim um, grasp that can kind of, that woe is me, that can kind of take place. Same thing with injuries. It's like you mentioned, like what can I control right now? I've been injured in sessions numerous times where you have the opportunity to pack it in and go home, or you can finish the session, doing what you can and obviously being smart along the way. But every time you're faced with any sort of thing like that, like I'm talking about, it's an opportunity to. It's just like training. Training is a skill set that we're constantly looking to improve. Every movement is an opportunity to get better and get better at that specific movement. So is adversity. Everything that happens to you is giving you an opportunity to become more resilient and to become to develop more perseverance. You're going to need resilience and perseverance and patience and dedication to be the best bodybuilder that you can be.
Mhm. What part of bodybuilding created the most resilience in you? Because I know you've talked about, the amount of food you've had to put down in the off seasons to actually grow. What part of the struggle has been most rewarding in terms of building up that resilience?
I think losing losing shows is, it sucks initially, but there's gratitude because I know that you have a choice. I have a choice in that moment. Is like I can take the route of like, oh, I guess this isn't for me, and just decide to quit. And, I can justify that for whatever reason. I'm getting older. I should focus on other things. Bodybuilding isn't everything, blah, 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 blah. Or I can say, I believe I can take this experience and use it to fuel me to continue to do the things that I know I need to do to eventually win. And within that, I am winning. I don't like to get into that whole participation trophy mindset a ton, because I think too much time spent there can make you forget that, like, hey, this is competitive. You're competing against other people. You should always, always, always be beating your previous self. That's the bare minimum. But bodybuilding is a cheat code to be successful in life. And I've always said that, like, bodybuilding has opened doors for me that never would have opened without being a bodybuilder and going through the rigors of being a competitive bodybuilder for 12 years now. It's given me a life that I never could have dreamed was possible. Coming out of high school and going through college, being a firefighter, paramedic, all that. So the win of bodybuilding is so much more than any show or a pro card or a placing. But at the end of the day, like, you're going to learn more from losses than you are wins. So I think losing is one big thing. And then for me, the eating, you touched on it, but it's a merry-go-round that always comes back around. Like, contest prep is what it is. Like, that to me is just like mental fortitude, whatever, hunger, tiredness, fatigue, ignoring that inner dialogue, or just not feeding it when it tells you, like, if you look at yourself and just notice, like, oh, I'm small, I still need more. I can silence that. I just live with it. It is what it is. There's another part of Gladiator that is tied to Stoicism, where Russell Crowe says to Joaquin Phoenix, time for honoring yourself will soon be at an end, Highness. And I think about that a lot in the bodybuilding industry, because a lot of people get stuck in what I call a trap of overpraising themselves and their strengths, and also feeding into the praise that others give them. It's easy to absorb all the comments and attention that you get, especially in a contest prep. You're not getting a lot of attention and praise when you're 52 weeks into an off season. You certainly aren't praising yourself, because you're just kind of like in a different place altogether with your mental. But so that's another place. I don't really praise myself. I don't speak highly of myself. It doesn't mean I lean into self-depreciation too much, but I don't need to focus on my strengths. I need to focus on my weaknesses. Focusing on my strengths is not going to make me better. They're already my strengths. I just need to keep doing what I'm doing. Where am I weakest at? So the merry-go-round of the off season for me is always just accepting that, the obstacle in the path for me is I need more muscle, because I have a big frame. I'm almost 5'11". I have long limbs. To do that, I have to be able to eat, and I have to be able to eat a lot. My calories are north of 6,000 a day right now, 7 meals a day. I don't like to glorify that. It is what it is. But at the end
Takes
of the
what it takes.
day, that's the ante that it costs to sit at the table to, achieve the goals that I have for myself. If I don't like it, you can quit, or you can still do it and not like it. Like, I don't like eating. I'm very vocal about that. I'm not a foodie. I don't really enjoy the meal part of it, the stuffing my face. It just is what has to happen. So I think the longer that I do that, and every off season that I do that, and the more I lean into it, and I don't even give it power of like, oh, I have to eat all this food. Like, it's Friday today where I'm at, not where you're at, but
Yeah.
I'm going to eat 7 meals. Saturday will come. I'm going to eat 7 meals. Sunday will come. Like, it's just as sure as I'm going to wake up, make my bed, and brush my teeth, I'm also going to eat 7 meals. Like, it's just, that's what has to happen. So there's a lot of gratification, because in 2018 is when I had the first realization for myself, like, oh, bodybuilding's a lot more about what you're doing in the off season than it is contest prep. Contest prep, I don't want to say it's easy, because it isn't, but the longer you do this and the more preps you get under your belt, you do realize that contest prep, it's really not that challenging. It's mental fortitude more than it is anything else.
Mhm.
The off season is where the preps are made and championships are won. You know what I mean? So when I take another successful off season and take that feather and put it in my cap, there is gratitude there, but there's a sense of fulfillment, because it's like, I just know that not a lot of people are going to keep doing that year after year after year. It's monotonous, but that's what it takes.
Yeah. And we actually touched on this on our episode that we did back when you and Joe were doing the Thinking Man's podcast, right? And it was this idea of stamina where you can be a great bodybuilder for an off season or two or for a contest prep or two, but can you do it for a decade? And especially in the game that you're playing where it's like you're a big dude, you're a super heavyweight, you're trying to be an open bodybuilder, pro open bodybuilder. It takes a decade to build a truly high quality open class physique, and that's if you have the genetics for it, right? So having the stamina to do the year long, year and a half, 2 year long off seasons, time over time over time, and be able to take the constructive criticism from those contest preps, from the judges, and from that close inner circle is so important. And I think a big part that you touched on as well is that both praise and criticism can be seductive. And if you lean too far into either of them, they can have their way with you. So my question to you is, how do you decide on who to trust when it comes to praise or criticism? Because I know you have a very small circle of people that you trust, but their word means a lot to you.
Yeah, that's a good question because I think for younger bodybuilders, both in the sense of age, but also time served as a competitive bodybuilder, no matter the division, you are going to have to learn to be selective over the praise and the critique that you take. We are living in a time where, for what bodybuilding is, if you think about it, it's a competitive side. You are getting on a stage in front of a panel of people to be critiqued against other people.
Mhm.
But we've almost entered this era where criticism is deemed negativity. And now, don't get me wrong, there's a way to deliver critique without being a total jerk and a total
Yeah.
dick. And I don't go out of my way to give unsolicited critiques. I don't just go and comment on people's. If someone asks me, and I know that they're, if you came to me and asked me like, hey, where are my weak points? I would give it to you straight because I know you want that. You don't
Mhm.
want me to sugarcoat it. And that's the way I am. So, I trust people that have an eye, and I know they have an eye. I trust people that know me. So obviously, who I work with, Dom Cardone, he's never gaslighted me or pumped my tires once. Not from the minute I started with him 4 years ago, and not today.
Yeah.
I know what my path is. I'm not delusional. Dusty Hanshaw, I've been on record saying, he's my mentor, he's my brother, he's my best friend. I would do anything for him. And Dusty can shoot it straight with me in one sentence. After North Americans last year, because he was there,
Mhm.
it was as simple as, look good, just need more. Like, that's it. That's the critique. And that's what it's as simple as that. It wasn't a matter of like, you needed to peak differently or your tan was off. It was like, you looked great. You just didn't have enough muscle in this endeavor. And the open bodybuilding side, it is a muscle thing. It is
King.
yeah, okay. So what's, back to the drawing board for me is this, it means doing the same things I did last off season, refining the parts of the process that need to be refined that I think I can improve on. But yeah, I don't send my pictures to a lot of people during a prep or an off season. Anybody in an IG comment section, I'm not going to really pay attention to, praise or glorification there. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful for anyone that takes the time out of their day to leave me a comment, but I just see the danger that can lead to if you become dependent on that. Toxic positivity or positivity that is done in that fashion can be just as bad as negativity,
Mhm.
because it can make you not work as hard. It can make you complacent. And complacency is not a good thing in life, but also it's not a good thing in bodybuilding. One of Dusty's many things that I've taken to heart, you have to be patiently aggressive.
Mhm.
Aggressive in your day-to-day actions to improve as a bodybuilder, but patience with your expectation of results,
Mhm.
especially as a taller bodybuilder. It's a long game. If you are tall and trying to get into open bodybuilding, you have long femurs, long humerus, whatever the case is, you are signing up for the longest marathon of your life. Accept it or don't. There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever aligns with you. Like I said, I learned that in 2018 when I got into like what I would call my first real off season, where I truly was like treating off season like prep. I had 4 years where like my off seasons were good, but I wasn't as locked in as I needed to be. There was, you know, you have the off weekend where you just didn't plan ahead and get all your meals in. You had a little bit more of a social life than maybe you could or I could at that time. And 18 is where I just realized, like, all right, man, the off season is just it's a matter of willpower just to keep eating. And I've never complained about the amount of food that I have to eat, or the monotony of it, or the sluggishness, or the lethargy, or the getting heavier. I mean, I started this as a middleweight. I was 172 at my first show. I was 230 at my last show. I've light heavyweight, super heavyweight. I'm on my fourth weight class. I've truly put a lot of size on my frame, and at the end of the day, it's still not enough, because that's what the results of my last showing were. That's what the feedback was. So, Michaela Acock is another close friend who I will fire pictures over to every couple months. And I know that Michaela and I are close enough that she is going to assess them with she has an eye. And not only is she going to assess them, she's going to give me feedback that I can use. Recently we talked about legs and leg training and quad sweep. And I'm trying to figure out how much frequency I can handle and recover and still, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of nuance that comes into it the more advanced you get. Yeah. And then with that nuance, you have to also make sure that you're not getting too in the weeds and overthinking things and trying to create the perfect split and trying to do everything as many times as you can from a training perspective. And I think having the people I have in my corner, like it just allows me to stay grounded and stay centered and remember that, look, no matter what I'm doing today, it's still, everything I do today is a vote for the physique that the judges are going to see when I get on stage again. Every meal I get down, every training session I execute well, every hour of sleep I get, every social interaction that I do or don't do. A lot of times being a better bodybuilder means learning to say no. Are you going out to an event that is going to keep you out 4 hours past your determined bedtime that you know you need to be successful at? Do you have to train legs in the morning? Like, again, my first 4 years of bodybuilding, I wasn't saying no enough. So, and the results, I was still growing and getting better, but if I wanted to take it to the next level and climb another rung on the ladder, I needed to say no more. I needed to be a hermit and to be, Jay Cutler coined it, to live in a box. Now I don't force anyone to have to do things the way I do them. I am an extremist. I do like to go further than I need to and then learn from that and pull back as needed. I've done it with training. I've done it with, even the social side of things. Like I went to a movie last weekend. I saw The Odyssey. Great film. If anybody hasn't seen it, go see it. I chose a time to go see it that was going to allow me to get I had a meal before and I had a meal after. Nothing was missed in bodybuilding, and I was still able to go see a movie. I've taken meals to weddings. I've taken meals to restaurants. I've taken meals to, I'm always going to do what I need to do for bodybuilding. That's a given. And then with that comes preparation. So I kind of got on a little bit of a tangent there, but yeah, I think the longer you're in bodybuilding, your circle is going to kind of form itself. You're going to learn who you can trust for honest feedback and who you're going to learn to be grateful and appreciative of. But, their feedback is more of like fans cheering from a team from the bleachers. It's awesome and it feels good. but it's not the feedback that's going to help you improve.
Right. And I think that the main word here is discernment. And can you curate everything in your life to be encouraging you towards whatever that goal is? And that also means discerning who's good for you in terms of your social relationships, what is good for you in terms of the work you do. I know you obviously quit a successful career of being a firefighter, a stable career at least, to come pursue bodybuilding full time. And that was part of the discernment for you, where you said, this goal is the North Star for me. And so I chose to curate my life in a way where everything now is directed here. So that way I can keep the main thing the main thing. I don't get lost in the weeds. I don't try to miss the forest for the trees and, try to overcomplicate things, majoring in the minors, as a lot of people say. Um, but then when it comes to obviously having a good group of people in that small circle, I think back to the best training partners that I have had over the years, right? Where my buddy Adam, who helped me through my first prep, he was a D1 hockey player and he was a savage. And we would go in there at Gold's Gym Venice at 4 a.m. to hit legs just because we knew no one else was doing it. And we would literally try to make each other puke as if it was some sort of badge of honor. Because, this is 2019. I'm still a young man. I don't really know what I'm doing in terms of bodybuilding. It's my first prep. I was just like, I'm just going to go in there and hammer it and work harder than anyone else. And then over the years, I've had some other really good training partners as well. My buddy Peter, who I trained with when I lived in Mississippi. Kyrie Cooper, who obviously we all know, we beat the hell out of each other for 2 years in San Antonio, and I made the greatest leaps in my bodybuilding having him. So when I think of my best training partners, I see you, who had Dusty Hanshaw as your training partner at the Muscle Factory in Arizona for a long time. And that's actually how I came across you initially. I remember I told Dusty this story that I had already been following Dusty and I had been seeing you on his social media, so I knew who you were. I hadn't talked to you at all. But in November of 2020, my dad bought a GT350, a Shelby, off of one of his friends in Atlanta. And he asked me to fly over to Atlanta and then drive it all the way back across the country to Los Angeles. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And he was just like, take your time driving it back, like no need to rush. And I was like, I'm going to stop at different gyms along the way that I want to go to. So I stopped at Metroflex Arlington. I got to see Branch Warren. And then I stopped at the Muscle Factory in Phoenix because I wanted to meet Dusty. And you happened to be there. You actually are the one who took the picture of me and Dusty. I still have it. I sent it to him. And he was like, man, that's crazy. So when you look back on those sessions training with Dusty, what was that like and what did you learn?
Oh, I remember that moment when we met in the gym, by the way, and I've taken so many pictures for Dusty. I'm like the designated photographer for still to this day. Like we'll be somewhere and hey, can you grab a picture? And he's like, hey, Tom. And it's just like I know what to do. I'm always gonna take a picture and I'm gonna click it 3 times. So hopefully there's one good one within the three.
Right.
Um, so everybody's eyes are open. But so my first time actually training with Dusty and not, in the gym around him, it was a leg day, and I was so amped that I didn't sleep. I just stayed up, and I was just watching movies, just wanting time to go faster, so it was time to go train. And he actually called me and that morning, which is funny because Dusty and I do not call each other unless it's planned. Like
Yeah.
you don't just randomly pick up the phone and call each other. If that happens, I'm like, I don't care if I'm pulled over on the side of the road. I'd be like, I got to answer this. Something's wrong. Um, but he's like, I told you the wrong time. We train legs at 9. Every other time we train at 11. And he's like, I'm on the way to the gym right now. And I was like, I'll be there. So I got there and I looked at it as like an opportunity to impress him. And I just wanted to earn, I'm big on respect. I really just want to earn my respect from my peers and people I look up to. I've always looked at coaches as mentors. Um, I've wanted that approval. I want the things spoken about me to others and behind closed doors. Like if someone's talking about me, I want them to say like, yeah, that dude works hard or he trains hard. Like he's not a pussy. He'll go after it. He'll get down. That means more to me than any placing's ever gonna mean. Is like he's a blue collar bodybuilder. So I wanted to earn his respect. And so I made sure to like, you know, when it came to racking and unracking weights, I was trying to, almost like a probationary, trying to earn my spot as a firefighter again. I was like, I was getting the plates, putting them on. Like I was just kind of really trying to be the grunt in the session. Not that he expected that or told me that's what I had to do, but that's the mindset I took on. With Dusty, I learned that there are no rules to training, just train hard. Along the way, you're going to learn that it does need to be some intentionality behind the intensity required. But first, just train hard. You can make a lot of progress and add a lot of muscle if you're just willing to empty the clip every single session, 4 to 5 times a week for a year and do it for another year and another year and another year. And then I just learned, he taught me how much more is really in the tank than what the mind will sometimes tell you. And I've watched him to this day. I have never saved Dusty from a rep he couldn't get. I think I have spotted one rep on the hack squat, maybe just helped him get to the top from like the 3/4 position, maybe a little bit of applied pressure. So that in
Two
itself,
fingers.
yeah, that in itself became a learning lesson of like he believes he can get any rep that he goes after, and he's not. So that's a skill in itself because I see a lot of people who are like, they'll barely get a rep on like a hack squat, and then they're going down again, and I'm like, you're not gonna get that. Like now we're going past the point of benefit. It's good. It can be a learning tool, but like if that's gonna be how you train, you're gonna run into issues or injuries. I think training with him forced me to get stronger than I ever would have on my own because he is pound for pound one of the strongest bodybuilders in the world. And I wasn't going to make him strip a ton of plates for me to do my set. So it was like, all right, dude, it's time to take the training wheels off and go after some sets and weights that I am absolutely terrified of, but I'm going to do it.
Time to grab your nuts.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that comes to mind too is like, when you're in a competitive bodybuilder mindset, and I know you're like this, like we always have a timeline in our head, like, all right, I'm getting ready for a show in 2 years. Everything I do today is for that show. At least that's how I've been. Dusty taught me like, yeah, that's great, and we need those goals in the distance, but like at the end of the day, I'm here to train hard today. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know what next month's going to bring. Life's going to happen, and maybe I'll get completely thrown off that course of that 2-year goal I have. Back to stoicism, I have control over my effort today, and today I can promise you I'm going to go really, really hard. I'm going to make sure I walk out of this doors knowing I couldn't have done anything more. There's a line, and it's one of my many defining moments being around Dusty is I was over by the drinking fountain at Muscle Factory and kind of walking back towards him where we were on the incline bench, I believe. And, as you develop enough muscle and, he's Dusty, so he gets a lot of attention for his size. But at the time, I was like almost getting enough size to where like everyone knew I was a bodybuilder. But I didn't have, I wasn't like, I'm not walking around looking like a top 5 national level guy.
Right.
But just some kid just asked like, what are you guys getting ready for? And Dusty's response was brilliant because he just said Tuesday. And it was Tuesday morning. And he just said Tuesday. And I'm like, that's it. Dude. That's as simple as this bodybuilding game really is. It's like, this is Tuesday's work.
Yeah.
tomorrow we'll handle Wednesday's work. And within that is like the bigger picture of like, you know, the your path. But yeah, he's just always kept things simple. Never tried to overcomplicate it, never tried to make it be this big extended thought process or something that you need to overanalyze, which I do appreciate because it kept me on a straight path. It still does, to where it's like, you know, I got smacked at North Americans, and I'm resilient. I can say that with confidence. I'm able to persevere, but in the moment when you get smacked in a placing, it stings. I don't care who you are. You want that stage to swallow you up, and after prejudging, you're like, I just want to get this tan off and go do something else. But you got to show back up for finals, um, and but because of him, I was able just to, you know, this is my path. This was what was supposed to happen, and I can either roll over or I can keep moving forward. So it's a choice right then and there. Um, and I guess I've always just kind of like kept that in the back of my mind is like whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I'm just going to, I know a few days after the show, I'm going to be back to training and do what I got to do to get better.
Yeah.
But within the training sessions, I mean, there's so many things I could probably extrapolate and talk about, but it, you know, the meat and potatoes of it is just like, just train hard. It doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life. Like we never came in together, and like his world could have been on fire. My world's not, like, that doesn't matter. When you enter the gym, like none of that shit. We're not here to have a social hour and vent. Maybe if we need to talk about shit outside of the session, but like there's work to be done when we're in that space. That switch has to get flipped, and that it's all business. So I've been able to learn detachment. There's a time to focus on the other avenues of your life. That time is not during your training session.
Yeah. And just let the record show this is the picture here. 2020. Look at me. Just a young little pup, big old Dusty, arm bigger than my head. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, man. I mean, that is brilliant. Just that takeaway of what are you guys getting ready for? And he just says Tuesday. And I think that when you can learn to kind of just shrink your world and just focus on what's in front of you, you end up being able to actually tackle the task without it feeling like this insurmountable thing. And one thing I've touched on is that human beings have inherently, most of us, a very high level of tolerance for discomfort or pain if we know it's not going to last for a prolonged period of time, or if we know that there's a set amount of time, which is why when we're in prep and you're 3 weeks out and you feel fatigued and tired and hungry and name any of the adjectives, you know in your mind it's only 21 more days. When there's a time limit on it, you can do it. If someone were to just say, "Hey, we're just going to keep getting peeled until you're peeled," a lot of people can't handle that due to the uncertainty. And so that's where having that skill of just saying, well, what are you getting ready for? Right? Tuesday. I'm just getting ready to win the day today. Then
Hmm.
that really breaks it down. And then it keeps your world small. You know, Dusty told that story of Aceto, you know, having stage 4 cancer. And he said, you know, I was never arrogant enough to get up, tell myself I'm going to go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. I would get up, I would use the bathroom. And if I had enough energy, then I would brush my teeth. And so when Aceto told him, like, hey, I'm about to make you dig. It is going to suck. And he would check in with Dusty. He would say, well, it's not stage 4 cancer. So I'm just trying to get through the day. Now, in terms of the psychology of Tommy and what gets Tommy going for, you know, one of those big top sets, because I think you touched on it earlier that you used to get very hyped up. And I know you've touched on it in some of your Instagram posts too. Over the years, you've learned how to manage your mind and your physiology to still get the most out of every set without paying the psychological cost of getting yourself too hyped up and then essentially like blowing your psychological load on that one big set. So what has that kind of looked like and how has that evolved over the years for you? The mindset going into a top set.
Yeah, I think, you know, in my 20s, I'm a young man trying to navigate becoming a young man and, understanding my place in the world. And, I was a Proby firefighter twice because I changed departments. There's a lot of adversity or resistance that comes with being in that role, and also deciding to like wear the identity of a competitive bodybuilder and let it be known that like, hey, this is what I do. I'm going to eat my meals. Like, you know, kind of made it harder for myself than it had to be because I wanted to be that thing, which ultimately is why I left that career. But there was a lot of anger and rage that I called on to train. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I think righteous rage and righteous anger is it's a it's a tool in the
Hmm.
toolbox, and it was very beneficial for me at that time. Along the way, it started not to be. Maybe it's training age, maybe it's life got different. I had other responsibilities. Maybe it's aging in general, but I just noticed that I was just feeling drained after that amount of exacerbation of energy towards the sets. A lot of the stuff that was a driving force to what was wrong with my gut was kind of highlighted on that sympathetic overdrive, like being stuck in fight or flight, because I quit a job with no income on the back end. I immediately went into survival mode when I did that.
Hmm.
And I stayed in that mode for a good 4 years before I built my coaching business. And before it, like for me, when I could finally pay all my bills and put them on auto withdrawal and not have to worry about, overdrafts or not being able to pay one bill or the other, that became my perception of wealth and richness, is like, I can pay my bills. I can afford the life I want to live. I'm winning. But that I spent 4 years of not having that feeling to get to that moment.
Yeah.
So it's draining. It takes a toll on the body and the mind. I gave up sleep because I needed to be, any hours I wasn't in the gym, I needed to be centered on making money and building and creating. And I think around 31 or 32 is where I started to kind of try to, I think I was starting to get more influenced by like the monk mindset, a little bit more Zen approach to things. And then I just, like anything I've done, I just started to run with that of like, all right, how do I idle myself down in order to call on myself for what I need to do for this next 45 seconds or 1 minute or however long the set's going to be, and then immediately get out of that. Um, so I think I saw you talk about it on a story or something recently of like, what intensity level am I going up to? Um, I used to live at like a 12 out of 10. That's how I ran through life. Like my world's on fire and I'm going to learn to control chaos.
Yeah.
Now it's very different. I might get to like an 8 or a 9, and I can do what I need to do and then throttle myself back down to like a 6. It doesn't mean I'm playing games or surfing Instagram or, talking to a bunch of people between sets, but I'm just calmer because I don't need that anger and rage that I used in my 20s. Now I need something different to continue to make progress. Um, Again, a lot of the psychological tools we're talking about are the same tools in the toolbox like gym equipment is, like training splits are, like, high reps, low reps, all the different things we see people talking about. Like these psychological tools are probably more valuable if you can learn to know which version of myself do I need to be today. Um, Maybe I don't feel like maybe I need to call on that rage some days just to really perform. And I'm not afraid to, but I can't live in that space for every training session, day to day, week to week, month to month. I will break down. My body will break down. It's shown me that it will break down. So I need to be respectful of that and mindful of that. Um, so I think it's a constant level of awareness,
Hmm.
but also it's a level of making sure that my ego isn't the only person driving the vehicle. I have to put the ego in the passenger seat sometimes. Um, I'm not one of those people that thinks ego is inherently bad. You need an ego to be a successful bodybuilder. You need to learn when to call on that. If you don't have an ego, that means I would challenge someone that says they don't have any ego, and I would wonder, like, do you actually believe in yourself? Then, if you say you don't have an ego, because part of believing in yourself might involve being egotistical to a degree. Um, so I think now top sets, back off sets, pumps, whatever the set is, I just look at it as like, this is what I got to do right now at this point of the workout. Um, Really, I'm trying to create a flow state for the whole session of, this is the required amount of work I got to do. Obviously, I have my heavy hitters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my approach to a pendulum squat isn't going to be the same as it is to a single arm rope pushdown. It doesn't need to. I don't need to get all amped up. But, I think I learned a lot about myself through coaching others too, because I see a lot of young guys who remind me of myself. I coach a lot of young guys and I watch how they carry themselves in the gym. The hood's on, the angry music is playing. And I almost seeing them, I saw my former self, and I could see where I knew I had to make the change. And just like I did, they're going to have to make the change at some point too. Um, Whether an individual can be aware enough and mature enough to make that change is another thing. Um, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, you can't resist that change when it has to happen. For me, I knew it needed to happen. I couldn't go at every set like it was life or death, because like I said, I've accrued some injuries, nothing ever major, but enough to where it's like, all right, something has to adjust, because I can't keep getting knocked down by, little tears here and there, little pulls, or having to work around things. Yes, it's a skill, but also, like, how do I stay on a path where I'm constantly keeping a level of performance that stays for months? Um, and for me, it was like, I have to get out of this run through the wall mindset. Um, and I learned a lot from Dorian. I've consumed every single piece of Dorian content that's available. I know I have. And I've learned from things he says now that he, not that he would has regrets or he would do anything differently, but I think, he's expressed that maybe it would have benefited him the last 6 weeks to not take the training and the failure as extreme as he did. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten the injuries he did. At the time, Dorian wasn't going to do any different because he was Dorian, but
Yeah.
years removed from it and years removed from the ego, he understands that. And I've tried to take that as like a learning lesson of, okay, if he's saying this now, how can I take what he's saying and apply it to what I'm doing? Because I'm still in the trenches of it. Uh, so I think it's just constantly being open and fluid to evolving as
Yeah, and I
needed.
think Yeah, and I think that's a really fine line to walk, because on one end you're in a sport that rewards you for being intense and having high levels of effort, and as you're going deeper into a prep, like, your effort levels on things like cardio, like, they increase over time, and like the duration and like the amount of suck that you have to endure gets more and more intense. And so your brain starts to associate, the more I can make this suck, the better I'm going to be. And I think that a lot of people will end up taking that too far, to the point where it becomes detrimental in a prep setting, and they're not able to temper the ego that tells them more is better no matter what. More is always better. And so it goes back to that idea of discernment, like, hey, what am I actually capable of, and what do I need to get this work done effectively? And at what point does this intensity no longer become effective? And I think that, self-regulation is one of the most important skills in anything you are trying to master. And I think that some of that is also a function of growing up and becoming more mature, because when I was younger and I was, 20 years old, 21 years old, and I was training at Gold's Gym in Venice, and I was looking around and I was seeing guys like Sean Roden and Dexter Jackson and Sergio Oliva Jr., and I just wanted to be respected for my work ethic because I did not have a physique that was worthy of respect by an open class bodybuilder. I mean, I just started bodybuilding. Um, I would grasp on things that I had endured in my younger years, whether it was like some form of bullying or some form of not feeling like I am enough. And that really drove a lot of the sessions. And that was psychologically expensive. That costed a lot to get under a heavy set of squats and go to that dark place and feel like you have to go to that dark place every time you're getting under that heavy squat bar or picking up a heavy barbell off the ground. And I think that as I've gotten older and I've also implemented stoicism, I've realized that that stuff doesn't really matter unless I allow it to matter. And now I couldn't even call on it if I wanted to. So it's like at 21 years old, I'm thinking of like, this girl that broke my heart or something. And it's like, yeah, I can use that in the gym. Now it's like I'm in a happy relationship. She treats me amazing. It's like I can't even call on any woman who's wronged me and use that as fuel. It's like I just look back at it and laugh. And a big part of that is just emotional maturity, or like someone who bullied me in the past. I recognize like, oh, that was a function of probably you not feeling good about yourself. It's like I can't even justify you making me feel bad in that moment as a way of using it as fuel now in this moment. Yeah.
I get that. I get that. And honestly, what we're talking about, it can be hard because that can break people when they no longer, if they've gotten to a place where they recognize that they no longer need that. It can almost create an identity conflict of like, well, how do I keep doing this? Because if you were fueled by rage and wanting to prove others wrong, and like for me, like when I moved to Arizona, I made it like I don't care if I end up home. I'm not moving back to Michigan because I don't want anyone to be able to have the thought that I failed and couldn't make it in another state. So
Yeah.
I immediately went into like, I'm going to show everybody, I'm going to prove everybody wrong type mindset. Even if they weren't talking about me, I created that narrative in my head of like, you'll see, I'll show you. And even now, like, there are times where like I will look around the gym, and if I feel like there's not enough people training hard around me, I will almost use that to kind of piss a little gasoline on my own internal fire of like, okay, I don't like the gym energy right now. I'm going to set the standard. I'm going to
Mhm.
be that guy. It doesn't mean I'm going to start screaming and shouting and being a total doofus, but I don't like what I'm seeing, so I'm gonna turn up the level of intensity in this space, and I hope that others take that and apply it to their own training. Um, and I think with coaching, I have to always be evaluating the situations that my clients are in. Where are they at in their journey? The biggest problem I see with you know being a coach or even social media in general is like you see how someone's doing something now. Maybe you didn't know about them 10 years ago, 6 years ago. If I'm coaching a 21, like we're talking about us in our younger years, like I just told a 21-year-old in the gym a few hours ago because he was working in with the guy I was training with and myself on a mega mass row. And I was giving cues to my training partner because my training partner needs to bring up his back. He's a top 5 national level guy and has been multiple times. He's at a different level. This 21-year-old, you wouldn't know he has a gym membership because he doesn't have any muscle. Not picking fun at him or making fun of him. That's just where he's at in his level of the journey. So he asked me, "What cues would you give me?" And I immediately stopped it right there, and I said, "None, because your job is to get as strong as you can. You don't need cues. You
Yeah.
need to be able to do 3 plates on this row for 12 and then work your way to 4 and then 5. Like that's where you're at.
Yep.
And it's the most fun you're ever going to have. I promise you."
Yeah.
And then I helped him through a set, and I know that I got him 8 more reps than he would have got by himself simply by just saying, "Go again, go again, go again." And it's the same thing Dusty did to me years ago. Not that I wasn't potentially going to go for those on my own, but it's like when you have someone almost giving you
Mhm.
confidence and encouragement, it's you try there's a level of trust that happens and you're like, well, I'm gonna go again. And I'm like, and then when you see like nothing bad happen, I didn't break myself, like it's a breakthrough, it's a transcending moment. um, and I know that he'll remember that and hopefully apply it to his training moving forward. um, so I have to, my job as a coach isn't to make people train like Tommy at 35. It's to make them train where they need to at that point in their journey. Maybe I'm talking to someone who's 50, who's got a host of injuries, previous, physiological stuff. They're older, more wear and tear. Maybe they have to employ something like I'm doing. But if it's a 23-year-old who hasn't unlocked that level of intensity, it's a different coaching approach. And I'd be doing them a disservice if I try to get them in the Zen monk mode that I find myself in. Um, I almost need them to be angry. I need them to have rage. I need them to call on some things that made them not feel so good as a child and use that. If anybody's seen the movie Waterboy, tackling fuel, like tackling fuel. That's what we're going to use in the gym, and it makes a lot of progress for you. You just have to know when to pivot. Um, I think that's something Stoicism will teach you as well: is improvise, adapt, and overcome. You're going to have to learn how to pivot as you age as a bodybuilder and as you age as a man or a woman. What worked for me at 25 isn't going to work at 35. What's working for me at 35 might not be what works at 40. I have to be open and fluid to evolving as I need to. But for me, it's like I don't like to create the notion of working harder at any point of my journey now. I don't like to be like, well, I'm 7 weeks out, I'm going to turn it up. Like, I was doing the amount of work I needed to do 20 weeks out, 40 weeks out. I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing. The timeline makes no difference. I don't need to dig any deeper. I don't need to work harder because the show date is drawing near. I need to keep that same standardized amount of effort that I've been giving the entire prep. The changes, the calorie reduction, the output increase, whatever the X's and O's of the prep, that's going to take care of the fat loss. I just need to keep showing up and doing the same amount of effort over and over and over. And I think that's the biggest thing I notice with clients too that are early on in their competing career is, they want to work harder or they want it to get harder. It doesn't mean you're going to get better if you start working harder 8 weeks out, 6 weeks out, 4 weeks out. Might get worse. You need to standardize what your level of effort looks like long before you even enter the contest prep, and then just hold that and maintain that performance.
I think that is such a huge portion of being an effective coach, is basically just learning to show people how to break through some of those plateaus. And I find it myself in my own mental performance coaching business where I'm not teaching any of the X's and O's of bodybuilding, but what I am doing is I'm giving people new perspectives on how to approach things. And you and I both know is that the mental game is such an important aspect of being a good bodybuilder that when the two are misaligned, you can have all of the genetic potential in the world and the physical potential, but if you can't master the mind, you will not see those results that the genetic potential is affording you. And it'll just stay potential. And I know that's one of those words that you probably hate as well, because a lot of people don't end up actually living up to their potential. But being able to recognize, hey, I've got something here, and we all have some form of a gift, whether it's genetic potential to build a physique or some sort of mental gift. I think you have a mental gift where you have mental fortitude, you have resilience, you know how to work hard for a very long period of time. And I think that you and I both recognize that neither of us are probably as genetically gifted in terms of like shape or our physiques as other people are. But what we lack in that, we make up for in our ability to master our mind to a level that a lot of people probably have not yet.
Absolutely. And the earlier one can recognize that, the better off they'll be. I knew very early on that I didn't have the greatest genetics. That was actually one of the first things Dusty told me was, you have above average genetics at best, like me. Um,
Hmm.
your mind has to be your strongest weapon. And I mean, that was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
So I, again, like many things, I take it to heart and I just accept it as like, all right, that's the reality. That's my reality. I don't need to ever wonder about my genetics again. I need to just focus on my mind. The mind leads the body. I've probably said that in 50 posts in captions in some way or another. The mind will always lead the body. So I think, within everything we're talking about, it comes down to your mindset and your what's going on between your two ears more than it does like the insertions of muscle bellies or the thickness that you have in your back or the quad sweep that you have. Like all that it is what it is. um, what's your mind look like?
Yeah.
So there's so many new I think rabbit holes to get into when we talk about mentality, and especially on your end with the mental performance coaching. A lot of times it's getting people out of their own way in order to allow them to move forward. Um, our minds can be our strongest allies or our worst enemies. We
Hmm.
get to choose and create the reality of which one of those the mind is.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the biggest takeaways, if I had to summarize up this podcast, is control what you can control on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. Those small decisions add up to whatever you end up becoming, but whatever you end up becoming physically is downstream from what you build mentally and the mindset and the way that you are stacking up the different types of skills and tools over the years and absorbing information from people who have done it before you and done it better than you. And so, my biggest thing that I tell people is stay curious. Try to absorb as much as you can and then have the discernment to recognize, does this serve me? And part of that comes with trying it out, right? And there's going to be conflicting information that you'll get, but that is where the discernment comes in. And, not being susceptible to the seduction of praise, not being susceptible to the seduction of criticism is going to help you go a long way when you can keep that objectivity and just put one foot in front of the other for a long period of time. Eventually, you will end up getting to wherever you need to be. But with that, Tommy, I wanted to say thank you for your time and thank you for coming on here and imparting some wisdom on another episode of Winning the Margins podcast. Is there any final messages that you have for the audience?
No, I appreciate you for having me on. I mean, this is my bag. I love talking about this stuff and just getting into the mind and truly dissecting it, and because it within that dissection is where you can truly figure out what you're capable of. But what you're capable of, you have to know where you're willing to go mentally. So I think I love what you said about stay curious. The biggest thing I could tell people is listen more than you speak. Hear everything, see everything. If you have opinions, that's cool. You're allowed to have an opinion. It might be wise to not really push a lot of those opinions and just listen, because a lot of the gifts are going to come if you're just keep your ears open and your eyes open. A lot of the little nuggets that are going to stick with you for your I've highlighted many things Dusty said to me 8, 9, 10 years ago. I could go even deeper with like things coaches said to me in like a lot of the little nuggets that are going to shape the trajectory and the course of your life are going to happen, and they might not seem as big and powerful in the moment, but you're going to realize it along the way. So listen more than you speak.
Yep. Listen more than you speak and walk around with open palms, ready to accept that gift. But thank you guys for tuning in. That was another episode of Winning the Margins podcast with myself, Gabriel Rocha, and Tommy Stiles.